Great. Can you give us a bit of background? Obviously, I know, we've spent time together. I know plenty about you, but I think there's some of my students that have trained with you, Tracy and Dan and some of those guys, Robin.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of guys that haven't trained with you. Can you just give us a bit of background on your martial arts and, where you how you got to where you are?
Sure. So my name is Craig Douglas. I am currently a retired police officer from South Mississippi. I did a total of 21 years on the job. The vast majority of that time was spent as a drug enforcement cop, a SWAT cop, or both simultaneously. I retired in 2011 to do training full time. So this is my 9th year of doing training full time. It's my 18th year of doing training under the Shivworks brand globally. I teach in 40 states in the U.S., 11 countries outside of the U.S. I have taught 4 branches of the U.S. military, 5 federal law enforcement agencies. I've developed an undercover officers combatives course within the largest federal agency in the United States, federal law enforcement agency. And I have a standing small contract within a very specific small section of the intelligence community that I've had for the past 5 years. I've been a martial artist since I was a kid. I was a martial arts nerd. I've probably done every martial art you can imagine. As I came up through my professional armed service career, I found that the vast majority of them were theoretical and failed me at the moments that I needed them the most, and began gravitating towards a combat sports methodology with a street context. And that's probably where I'm at now. I'm probably most known in the training community for taking a mishmash of equipment and using it well outside of the manufacturer's recommended guidelines for use, and doing the entangled gunfight problem, running laboratories and seeing what that looks like. And that's kind of what I'm known for as far as creating doctrine, strategy, tactics, and techniques for that particular problem where training method didn't exist before. Fighting in cars using a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu methodology. I've been very successful in doing that. And pretty much any niche tactical problem that is kind of a black swan event, that's where I tend to dwell, and that's where I tend to spend my time. I'm currently a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been doing it on and off, probably mostly off, since 1994, and have been pretty steady under Alan Belcher here in my hometown of Biloxi, Mississippi, for the past 5 or 6 years with them when I'm home. So that's a thumbnail.
And I was actually talking to some of my students the other day, and saying about, I was giving them a little bit of background. And last time we were together, I think you were purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I actually said to my students, it's like the fakest purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that I've ever come across. That, doing Jiu-Jitsu since 1994, even whether it's off, there's still a lot of core skills that are just phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's interesting, man, that and James, you've been a martial arts forever, and we've both gone deep into our respective orthodoxies and abided by those rules, and then evolved into what we are now, which is much more interdisciplinary, I think, than the some of the orthodoxies, and I think with guys who have been on our journey and who are our age, I'm 52, it's interesting to see where the convergence is with all of these systems, what's alike, what's different, our individual truths, things that drive a regular community versus short coursework training that we do. And what informs our teaching. So that's really, I think, besides my own technical development still, which I'm always interested in, the curriculum development part, the teaching part, and teaching people how to teach, because I think we'll both agree, man, there's just a lot of bad instruction, a lot of poor, and it's not it's not willful ignorance, but it's ignorance nonetheless. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're at now in our journey. So that's what interests me most right now. That.
And you say, just to step back a second, you say that you did a lot of martial arts, and you found that through the failing of those martial arts, you kind of refined it down to where that. Would it be fair to say, and I suppose this might be a bit controversial, especially from my background being predominantly Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, would it be fair to say that no martial art has all the solutions, right? That you can't just be a karate guy and say that karate is going to solve all of your problems, or be a gun guy and say that guns are going to solve all your problems, right?
I think anyone who spends all of their time in a single unarmed system, in a single range of combat, whether it's grappling or striking, if they say they're training for self-defense and not just enjoyable athletic endeavor, I think you're doing yourself a grave disservice, thinking that you're prepared for that. So every possible range, we need to have striking, we need to have grappling, we need to understand contextual concerns that are environment specific, and one of the things that I think was probably very profound for you when you and I first met, as it is with most high-level BJJ practitioners, was how much Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu changes when we apply that in a car, a 3D environment that historically is very alien, and the movement modality turns into something that is more a weird cross between BJJ and rock climbing almost. So it's so specific. If you don't, and what's interesting to me is a tactics and a motor skills instructor, and that's kind of how I think of myself now. Not so much a martial arts instructor, but really a tactics and motor skills instructor. As a guy that's teaching people, self-defense and survival skills, what does the novelty of a very, very, very specific environment do to an orthodox skill set? And I think the most observable example of that is what grappling, BJJ, or any grappling system, any orthodox grappling system that historically is practiced in open space, what that looks like now when it's practiced in 3D space. And I know that I have seen a good BJJ black belt who's unfamiliar with the environment get crushed by a guy that's not anywhere his equal in the orthodox skill set, but understands a couple of rules that are specific to the environment. Now, he's good with that trick once, and a BJJ black belt with probably 20 minutes of instruction understanding, oh, well, there is no top and bottom anymore, and the hierarchy of positions now is flipped on its head. It doesn't matter that I get my back taken when I can post my feet on the door and literally break your body against the B pillar, right? Once they understand that, you're not going to wreck that guy. So you got that trick one time. But again, as far as curriculum development and what we need to do to inform our people that trust us and pay us money to learn self-defense skills, how important is getting out of the gym, getting into novel environments and testing in novel environments and giving our students the experience. Moreover, how important is that in the larger scheme of things than whether we do BJJ or Samba? So I think that's an interesting thing to contemplate.
Especially when we teach, because you and I now predominantly teach short courses. Yep. Okay, so especially when and I think one of the biggest changes for me, just to go back to quickly actually on two things you mentioned. Number one, first of all, the fighting in the vehicle. The first thing that I remember is us completely wrecking my Pajero. And 2 years later, the BB is still rolling down inside the dashboard. Yeah. But also, inside that vehicle, then you're actually saying, listen, don't forget, you've got the roof to be able to move off of, and all of a sudden, when as you say, there's doors, there's the floor, there's the seats, there's the roof, and all of a sudden now it changed everything for me from the point of view of fighting within that vehicle. The other thing that I vividly remember is, and I think it was the first time you came over, and I was on the ground. We'd set off, one person holding a gun, standing, the other person with the feet on the hips, right? And I think I was the guy underneath, and I took my opponent into my guard, and my brain immediately went, well, this is fantastic. Like, life is sensational for me. But then you let the second guy go. And the second guy was the one that I'd become focused on this world that was in front of me and the comfort that I felt having this guy in my guard, regardless of the fact that there was, the airsoft guns. Now, all of a sudden, the second guy, and I remember looking across, and I think you kind of went, James, and I looked across and I saw this guy about to soccer kick me in the head. And I realized that the world was a very different place when there's more than one involved and when there's weapons involved. And I think that was for me, that was a big kick into opening my mind. Sorry about the noise. Yeah. We've got pups.
No, fine. My pups are being quiet for now.
We'll have a house competition in a second.
Right.
So I think that, but I think that experience, a lot of people don't ever experience that kind of thing, right? So then there's no need to open up their mind to other possibilities or even the failing of what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think more than anything, besides giving them the benefit of our experience in martial arts, them being able to sift through a bunch of trial and error and get at least a cogent distillation of our experiences that work. And that's not to say that we've created our own martial arts, or arguably we have. Maybe we have. Maybe there's James Rue, beat your ass, whatever, jiu-jitsu.
Craig.
And there's Craig Fu. I don't know. Maybe we have created our own martial arts, but I think besides giving them a reductionist and congruent curriculum and developing that curriculum from the benefit of our experience, we also have to facilitate an experience. I tell people all the time that, when I had my skull fractured by a socket wrench, the last conscious thought I had was when I was fighting another guy in a 2-on-1 over a gun. The last conscious thought I had was, I wonder if I'll feel the bullet enter my head. And then the next conscious thought were my heels going down these stairs as the cover team had gotten in and gotten me out. And that's a heck of an experience, man. And it's an experience that forever changed my martial journey, informed how I looked at training, informed how I trained. And one of the things I think we should do as instructors is make an attempt to provide someone the benefit of an experience like that without the consequence of it actually happening. Right. And I think, and I wish I could say again, I knew by education what I was doing. I don't have a master's degree or a PhD or upper level, education in this area, but I've always kind of understood intuitively, and I'm pretty observant as a human being, as a teacher, as an undercover officer, and a person working in a high-risk profession. And I kind of followed my gut in creating the evolutions and the process over a weekend where we take someone and give them some profound emotional bookmarks, to use my buddy John Hearn's language. And I think giving people those profound emotional bookmarks is what causes someone to lose 50 pounds. Mm-hmm. Commit to the jiu-jitsu journey, train regularly. It's interesting to me to facilitate that experience, and I think that's as important as the content that we're delivering.
Mm. And I know how I understand entirely how you give those profound emotional bookmarks. But with that, do you find, because your course, there's no doubt about it that it's not an easy course. It's not something that anyone can sign up to do and say, I'm going to breeze through this. Even guys that have got game, I've seen, that have struggled. do you find that some guys sign up for the course and they do it and they have that profound, you know, emotional bookmark, and they go, I don't want to, I would rather stay in my world and blinker myself.
I never see him again, never hear from him again.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not common, James. In fact, what's more common is when somebody experiences that, and you know, one of my jobs is to make sure the wheels come off safely for someone in the coursework, and to supervise the wheels coming off, and to do it in an environment that's safe, where, especially if they're alumni there, you know, and that guy makes that awful panic sound with the helmet in his mouth, and a dude's on top of him, and the guy has no jiu-jitsu experience, and it's that wounded animal keening, almost awful sound. Everybody there who's an alumni is like, oh, fuck, man. Yeah. And that guy, you know, we take the helmet off of him, and he's wild-eyed, and there have been some breakdowns in the court. It's common. It's common for men and women to have, there's some kind of meltdown. That's not uncommon. But it's important that person be in an environment that is safe, that they can experience that, and it's a common shared experience. And to be quite frank, it's the price of entry into the Shivworks community and Shivworks culture. It is. You know, what I do, as mainstream as it's become now compared to how it used to be, will never be it'll never be a general course that's suited for everybody. And I'm fine with that.
It'll never be a market, right? You can't and it does, you know, certainly when I think it was about 7 years ago, I think that even longer, that you first came out, and then it was very niche, the way that I saw it.
2010, 2011, somewhere around there, was it? Sorry. When I came to South Africa, it was either 2010 or 2011, James. I can't remember.
Was it that long ago? Yeah, so 9 years ago.
It was a minute. It was a minute and Phil and I both came. As a matter of fact, I just saw Phil in London for his 50th birthday. And we were talking about, and pulled a lot of the old photos up. I'm pretty sure that was 2011, James. Either 10 or 11.
And Phil is on, actually. Phil's actually, he put a hi guys on here, so that's cool.
Oh,
yeah. 2011, wow, that just makes me feel terrible.
I'm pretty sure it was 2011, man. I'm pretty sure it was.
That's amazing. And it was very niche, right? It was very, it wasn't mainstream, and I find it extraordinary how obviously it's still not mass market, and I don't think that it probably ever will be mass market, but it's certainly just become, you know, you're the guy wearing the yellow jersey in the race right now. You know, it just, the growth of your program has just been extraordinary.
It has. And here's the other thing too that's incredibly important to me in being on the road, especially, you know, for the past 18 years and the past 9, probably an average of 42 weeks out of the year being on the road. There are guys now who are outside of me, having trained with me, who are legitimate combat sports guys who are starting to look at this problem. And one of the things I've said was, if this is going to ever actually become a legitimate body of work, albeit a niche body of work, there have to be other people than me looking at this. And I think about those guys who are legitimate combat sports guys who haven't trained with me. I think about those guys like you who are legitimate combat sports and seniors to me in combat sports who have trained with me, who, you know, have gone and done their own thing, you know, with some influence from me, but still it's distinctly different. And I think honestly, the next decade really is going to be a golden age for the development of this interdisciplinary contact range problem solving coursework to just explode, man. Between that and getting the gear made to do this correctly versus do a hodgepodge of mishmash up of gear. I think the next decade, man, is going to be super exciting. I really do. So yeah, and legitimizing it too, because here's the thing, getting organizations to do contact range marking cartridge training, that's hard. And I've made inroads there in doing that, but it's taken damn near 2 decades to do it. So and we're just barely scratching the surface now. So the more people that are doing this, the better. And looking at it, it's kind of like when I almost feel like it's kind of like when we stopped using the language NHB and Vale Tudo, and it became more orthodox MMA, as we call it now. I kind of feel like we're right at that moment. When it's getting out of the garages and best practices are being established and on what to train and how to train, and everybody's kind of recognizing that, and you're seeing slightly different variations, but everybody's kind of starting to look the same. One of the big things is the angle of the gun. Yes. For the most part now, almost everybody that's teaching a contact range shooting course is teaching a downward angle. Yeah. And that wasn't happening. That wasn't happening even 5 years ago. But they're teaching, hey, you need to have the angle down because the support hand generally is ahead of the muzzle, and there's less likelihood of shooting yourself. Just something like that, identifying something like that as a best practice, and stopping the speed rock shit on the ranges and thinking that's a valid thing. That's been a huge deal, and that wasn't, we weren't pretty much all in agreement that much even 5 years ago.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But you still see, even today, you still see people doing that whole, drawing the firearm and then the hand staying right by the hip, pointing straight forward and that kind of thing. So there is still a way to go, right? To be able to. And do you feel like sometimes, and I guess if we step back a long way in time, the Gracies probably felt this when they were bringing Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in against an established stand-up karate, if you like. And there's obviously a lot of people know, but it's not going to work. It's not the right way. Did you feel like you're fighting against the tide sometimes? Or
not as much. Not as much, because much like the Gracies, okay, we've got the gear. Let's see if it works.
Yep.
We've got the gear, I won't say ECQC is quite analogous to a Gracie challenge, but anybody that wants to show up in either me or or anyone else's coursework that kind of knows what they're doing and understands what the best practices are, okay, come on, show us. And you'll get those guys. That, well, what I do is too deadly for the street, and it can't be trained that way, and there's no way that I can simulate ball ripping and eye gouges and purple nurples and titty twisters and all that. You'll get guys like that, but I think those guys. Here's the thing, too, James. We're a step removed from the younger generation, in that we can remember stupid martial arts, and there are still a lot of stupid martial arts out there. However, most young people were brought up in MMA, and the whole, and to make that point even more, life imitates art. Back in the early 70s, when you had the Kung Fu movie explosion, bad guys weren't kicking each other in the nuts with like a shitty round kick. They started doing that after the Kung Fu movie explosion. You start seeing that in the street. You may not have guys who have trained in MMA, but they understand from 26 years of MMA broadcast that if I lunge at you, tackle you, straddle you, and punch you in the face, and you turn around and I grab your neck, that works. Yeah. So again, I think most kids understand that and I think, you know, they have to sift through less garbage than we did and less, you know, faith-based systems than we did.
And
I think that's one of the big things about the Gracies, man, that we're forever in their debt. They turned the martial arts world on its head, and they stopped a lot of this bullshit. They really did.
And I often say to students, you know, that the bad guys, you know, for what bad guy, the guys in the street that you might get in a fight with these days are not the same as they were 20 years ago. They're not the same being, you know. When I don't know, 10 years, 12, no longer than that, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when I was working on the doors, it was a haymaker punch. It was the slowest punch you've ever seen in your life. Or it was some guy who would square up in his karate stance, whatever. It was really, really easy. And I wouldn't want to go back to working on the doors now because it just won't be. People know what a double leg takedown is. People know what, you know, they know what a sprawl is. They know all of that stuff. They know what a rear naked choke is. It's just not that easy any longer. The bad guy, the potential drunk bad guy in a pub has changed significantly.
Well, and here's the other thing, James. I mean, MMA is a violent sport and it attracts a violent type of person. I mean, how many kids have we known that trained who were poor, you know, who trained in an MMA gym that they may not have been good kids, you know.
No.
They may have been involved in some minor mopery, you know, some you know, less than savory stuff. So yeah, to say that MMA guys don't understand sucker punching and criminality and weapons, that's not true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not true at all.
And in Cape Town, you know, we obviously have the whole knife culture as well. And that, you know, that for me, that was one of the big things about doing the street smart stuff, was the fact that I guess I realized that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was perfect for what I call a social violence. You and me in a pub get annoyed with each other. Neither of us are intending to kill each other. It's an ego-based argument. So it's a couple of punches. Someone will break it up. It's kind of, you know, it's not that bad. But I realized that there's a criminal violence that is a completely different situation, and you can't. Is jiu-jitsu necessary and essential? Yes, if you land on the ground, you better know some jiu-jitsu. But is it better? Do you need a whole bunch of other skills as well to be able to, you know, separate from that fight or whatever? Yeah, there's more than just, again, going back to that, more than one solution to those problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the classic paradigm for a street fight in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is two relatively, you know, good-looking young Brazilian dudes wearing bathing suits fighting over a really smoking hot Brazilian chick in the sand, you know, and whoever, you know, is not unconscious at the end of it walks away with her ride.
Yeah.
That's, you know, nobody's jumping in for the most part. I mean, granted, there's horrendous criminality in favelas, but I mean, there's not a jiu-jitsu problem for that, or there's not a jiu-jitsu solution for those. Right. Those are mostly gunfight problems, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Avoiding the ambush problems.
Yeah.
So
a quick one here. Aubrey, one of our students, has said, what would you say is the most important concept? So he's one of our students, okay, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu student.
Okay.
Important concept for us as BJJ students to focus on?
I think one of the most important concepts as a BJJ guy is to think about, are we talking about for self-defense, or I would assume self-defense?
Yeah, that's just
the jiu-jitsu question. I think, what are you using jiu-jitsu for? And there are different ways to use jiu-jitsu, you know, and I think thinking about how you're using what you already know is super important. So spending more time on get-ups versus guard work, you know, and maybe doing that more frequently. There's some information out there that says that recency is the biggest factor in what comes out in a given moment. So if that's true, then let's say we, had a lesson for the night. We did a warm up. We worked on a sweep and maybe a submission, and we're going to roll a little bit. And let's say we're going to do, I don't know, 4 6-minute rounds. Maybe the last round before everybody gets up, shakes hands, hugs up, and walks out. Maybe the last round is with a knife. Mm-hmm. So everybody leaves training with a mindset of hand control, getting up and escaping. Maybe that's what we send. If we're a self-defense school and we say we're teaching people how to protect themselves, maybe the last roll of the night, and that's just that little bit. Maybe we don't even teach anything specifically, but we add a sense of urgency with the weapon, and we force them to problem solve with their jujitsu, and we send them out the door that way. I think doing something like that and remembering that context is important and recency is as important. I think that's a really that's an important way to frame it. That's an important thing to always think about, is what you're using jiu-jitsu for and how you're training your jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it's interesting because I agree with the recency. And in fact, one of the things that I've often said is the time, if I'm going to get attacked, the time that I most want to be attacked is the day that I finish teaching a course.
Exactly.
Right? If I've had 3 months off, don't attack me then. Attack me the day that I finish teaching the course, because that day it's going to be amazing.
Absolutely.
But interestingly, I think so. I have this thing in my mind also where I think what you've done most, or what you've done for the longest, comes through as well under stress. I'll give you the example that I've got. A friend of mine, a guy that I know, he's a 5th dan in karate. He's done karate for, I don't know, 30 years or whatever. And a few years ago, he decided that he wanted to look at boxing. He wanted to look at being able to box. So he started training. He got into he went to a boxing club. He trained. He did a couple of amateur fights. Did well, no problem at all. And then he decided to step in the ring against a guy who's a friend of mine, also a MMA instructor, been boxing for 20 years, really good fighter, hands like lead. And it was very interesting because they got into the ring, and the karate guy, he put his guard up and he looked like a boxer for a few moments until he caught one of those liver shots. And all of a sudden he went from here to literally karate blocking against a boxer. And it just became horrific. And it was interesting for me to see that, because I was like, man, he's done 3 years of training, but what took over was that thing that he'd done for 35 years. The more
myelinated neural pathway.
Right.
Yeah, that definitely recency, and I would agree. Honestly, I would agree with you that, primacy takes precedence over recency. I would got the most time in. Absolutely, because that's a lot of unwiring, and we can do some shortcutting like that with emotionally anchoring things and making it really costly for doing certain things. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you, James, that primacy trumps recency. Yeah, definitely, no doubt. What you've got I have a story like that, similar, with a buddy of mine who was, an old judo guy who got into Muay Thai and he was a police officer, got into a foot pursuit after a guy took the window out of a patrol car in the prisoner compartment. And guys running and slipped the cuffs. Had broken the cuffs and was running. Big, strong guy. Hopped up on crack cocaine, and he's in this foot pursuit, and he's gassing out because this guy's just younger and more athletic. But the guy turned, and my buddy just immediately, in the moment, went for a lapel grab on a guy that's wearing a tank top, as he was running into him, that was the first thing he did versus, you know, a clinch or throwing his hands up. And the guy threw one right down the middle and knocked him out.
Gee.
And fortunately, the guy bailed you know, and Ken woke up, you know, probably 10 seconds later. But I mean, the guy could have, you know, beat him to death, stomped him, taken his gun, done whatever. You know, he was out for probably like 10 seconds.
Wow.
But, and he was an old school judo guy, competed for, you know, like 5 years before his body got to, but that's what came out.
Very hard to undo those training scars unless you invest a lot of focused attention on that. Charles, on the edge here, I just got to actually, Charles here has asked a question, but I've got to tell you a little comment about Charles. So I ran a course a few months, I guess it was about 6 months ago, and I'd never met Charles before. He was just, I think, new to our academy, and he came along for this weekend course that I was doing, and I said, hi, have you trained before, all the rest of it? Straight out of his mouth, yes, I've just done the sheepdog response course.
Okay.
I was like, this is fantastic. Now I'm being compared to Tim Kennedy. This is just a benchmark that's just too much.
Sure.
But it was cool, actually, and I think I fared fairly well. So
I'm sure you did.
But so speaking of multiple disciplines, drawing from them with self-defense, in a limited time, what I know my answer to this, in a limited time, what is the best striking art to cross-train in your opinion? Also, what is your opinion on use of striking in self-defense in general?
I think the best striking art by far is boxing.
Yep.
Hands down. I don't see how that could even, you know, the sweet science trumps all. 4 punches, attributes, and a lifetime to work them. You know, I don't see the sense of range and timing and everything. You know, I think the 3 biggest are boxing, wrestling, and jiu-jitsu. And you have to, and personally, wrestling being the priority, you know, and jiu-jitsu and boxing being slightly less important, but still, it would be a very narrow triangle.
Yeah,
a very, very narrow triangle, with wrestling slightly above.
Because wrestling solves more problems than the boxing and the jiu-jitsu.
I think wrestling. Well, and there are a couple of reasons for this. I think wrestling because the wrestler decides the range. Ultimately, the wrestler decides the range. The wrestler decides whether it stays vertical or whether it goes horizontal. Now, wrestlers can't finish, okay? Or they can, okay? Actually, they can finish pretty devastatingly, but Greco in particular, I think, is probably the one that translates the best to the weapons-based environment with the hand control and the hand fighting issues. The ability to disengage and go for weapons, plug weapons in while entangled, take a guy down, or just, you know, break range into you know, pummeling a guy down. I think wrestling's the most important, and I think also that nothing teaches posture and the ability to stay upright better than wrestling. You know, the anti-grapplers, the counter-grapplers, people like that, their remark about never go to the ground, don't go to the ground, and the solutions they offer are historically never based in posture. Nothing teaches you posture in the vertical plane of fighting like wrestling. Nothing does, okay? So if you truly want to stay upright because you are concerned about another guy coming in, then wrestling merits a lot of time. It really does. Once you understand posture, head position, and things like that, it doesn't take a ton of maintenance, but it's super important. And I think initially inculcating people vis-a-vis orthodox, slightly modified orthodox wrestling drills, I think that's a great way to introduce someone into the idea of unarmed self-defense that bridges into weapons or combatives. So and to answer the second part, I think striking is an awesome way to finish, provided we're not exchanging.
Yeah.
So it questions the utility of boxing. I like putting someone in a position of disadvantage where they can't hit me and I can wail on them with impunity. And that's whether they are standing or whether they are grounded. I love to finish with strikes on the ground. I'm a huge ground and pound guy. I am. I like finishing with blunt force trauma to the head with multiple times where this person can't defend themselves, or finishing with a weapon or escaping. I think a preemptive strike to hit and run is a good option. I think a preemptive strike to hit and access a weapon is a good option. And I think a preemptive strike into a barrage of more debilitating strikes can all work. But choosing to maintain the wingspan with an adversary and exchange with someone, I think is poor self-defense. I do. So to answer your question, I think striking is relevant and a good way of solving the problem on the way in or on the way out.
Yeah.
But the same thing, honestly, the same. I feel the exact same way about striking as I do blade work. I do. I never want to stand with someone and exchange.
And who does? Who would, and that's where I see guys doing blade work sometimes and they stand and they duel. And of course I understand that dueling in the same way as boxing builds attributes, it builds timing, it builds targeting, all that kind of thing. However, to think that in a street a street situation that two people are going to stand there and duel with each other and not be on drugs at the same time, I don't see that happening. And
yeah, exactly, that's stupid. And if it's part of their culture,
yeah, that's different.
Fine, no problems. I'm not going to do that.
No.
And if I'm teaching someone that comes from that culture, then they probably have the knowledge and don't need to come see me. So, I mean, that's stupid.
Yeah,
that's like wanting to be in a gunfight. I'd much rather be and have been in a shooting. I don't want to be in an exchange of fire, an exchange of blades, or an exchange of fists. Fuck that. Yeah. That's dumb.
It's just unpleasant at the best of times. Right?
Yeah, and it's in any given Sunday. It really is. It's in any given Sunday. It's anybody's ball game, to use an American expression. So, yeah, I don't see it. I don't.
And so Ryan has said, if you 2 to 3 particular skills to give them an advantage in a real world situation, what would those 3 things be? And so to expand. So I guess he's saying, if you could only teach someone 2 to 3 things, well, I think you've answered the question, right? It's boxing, jiu-jitsu, and wrestling.
Well, as far as hard skills, I would say if we were going to, let's say we call boxing, jiu-jitsu, and wrestling the holy trinity. If we were going to, if we were going to use a cooking analogy, it would be a tactical mirepoix. Okay, so we got that. I'd add 2 more things to that. A heightened sense of awareness and a practiced sense of social literacy and verbal agility.
Yep.
Because here's the thing, and I know this is going to resonate for you, James. Historically, in the combatives community, if somebody didn't walk away from our fence, then we were using the fence to set up and smash someone. and there was very little practice in actual verbal problem solving. There's a phrase or two, and then it went immediately to smash, 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 smash. And I think, especially now, with things, at least, and it's very regional and very country specific, but certainly here in the U.S., with everything being filmed constantly and people doing things in the United States based on political beef and political bent, just to get you wound up. I think the ability to be cool and be verbally agile and talk your way out of shit or diffuse things genuinely, and practice doing that, I think that's pretty important. Yeah. I think a lot of times, unless it's an actual criminal assault where somebody's targeted you, they're a bad guy, they want to take something from you. So we have that. But we also have a lot of social violence that just comes out of a dick measuring contest. Okay. Mm-hmm. So a minor collision, that doesn't result in a lot of damage. Two guys get wound up about that. And the guy's like, "You just hit my fucking car, man. What the fuck is wrong with you? Why don't you watch what you're doing?" So I have a moment there where I can say, "Hey man, fuck you. I was watching what I was doing. And you're not the guy," and let it escalate. Or I've practiced saying something like, "Hey man, I apologize. My mind is not here driving. It's actually on my kid who's in the hospital, and I'm distracted, and I am sorry." Mm-hmm. And the ability through practice and acumen to say something like that, and with most people in a social violence situation that aren't criminally bent, to just take the wind out of their sails and mean it, and for it to be authentic and effective, it has to be practiced. Yeah. I mean, we've got some guys that are really badass shooters and great jiu-jitsu guys who are socially awkward. And when they try and problem solve in a non-kinetic way, it's just not believable. So practicing that kind of stuff with a guy that's, arguably maybe slightly on the spectrum, and teaching him, "Hey dude, when you say that, kind of open your face up, don't be so wooden. That's why these people are starting shit with you, because when you say I'm sorry, nobody believes you. Okay. Open your eyes,
like in a fire, right?"
Right. So I think that would be the other thing: enhanced awareness, practiced, learned and practiced, enhanced social literacy and verbal agility. And finally, the third thing would be, contextualized combat sport. Those three things, I think, go a long way, man. It's a pretty complete program.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that the verbal agility, the good awareness, the verbal agility, that kind of thing, at the end of the day, actually, this is the highest percentage chance for success. Because if you get into the whatever, right? If you get into the physical fight with someone, then you might be trained, but there's no guaranteed outcome on any of that. So having good awareness, being able to see it before it comes, being able to de-escalate, actually you should be putting almost more investment in that than anything else, because your percentage chance for success out of that is a higher return rate.
Absolutely. Well, James, I think there's an element of people there's probably a thing where there are people that train martial arts because they want to test themselves. They do. Yeah. I think combat sports provides a healthy way to do that, but a lot of combatives don't. They don't provide a healthy way to test. And everybody trains and trains and trains, and they're implicated with this mindset of never quitting and hitting first, hitting often, blah blah blah, and they wonder whether this shit actually works.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we start getting a little bit more hyper aggressive, and I know you've seen this, but you know, it bears question, you know, hey, what are we doing with people? You know, I think having a healthy testing venue, I think that's super important to keep people from wondering whether their shit works or not, and you know, possibly manifesting in unhealthy behaviors, and understanding that, look, man, this is a real fight. This is real, and especially if you know, in the correct way, simulate criminal stuff like we do. You know, where it's not a jiu-jitsu match, it is a 2-on-1. You know, I mean, after you get out of a good simulated 2-on-1 and you get scuffed up a little bit with a helmet and protective gear and everything, you know, if you've got any kind of real introspection and contemplation about the event, we've done our job, you know, it hammers home the importance of, man, I really, really, really like to get better at my verbal skills, because I don't want that to ever happen to me. That's what we should be doing, dude.
Yep. And that's one of the final things that I do on my courses. I put the guys through that, and the purpose of putting them through that, and the purpose of them experiencing that failure, is to understand that, especially the security guys, to understand that everything that comes before the fight is so important, and they've really got to lean on that and not lean on how hard they think they are, or you know, whatever. And I find that a lot of guys, a lot of people, guys especially, think that they want to be able to, or they want to know how to fight, and they think that they're tough enough, but actually they really don't want to know how to fight, because getting punched in the face isn't as pleasant as they think it might be.
Yep.
So yeah, so I think a lot of people don't do combat sport, but if you train in combatives or something of that sort, go and step in a ring and just find out what it's like, just one time, just to let yourself know.
You know, Bruce Lee said it best: boards don't hit back.
Yep.
And if you're not getting resistance, and you're not getting opposition, and you're not getting freedom of action, and you're not getting malevolent intent fed back to you, you don't understand fighting.
Yep. Yeah. Just one more thing. So I'm going to let you go real soon, Craig, because I realize we're out of time. A 3-part question here from James. And the reason why I'm really keen is because there was, I watched the videos with you and John Lovell a little while ago, and I love those videos. So how was it working with John, the warrior poet? What brands the clinch pick? What brands of clinch pick do you think are best? The Shivworks one, of course. I can answer that. Right. Do you follow Ed Calderon? And if so, what's your thoughts on his class and mindset? So how is it working with John?
Man, I really like John Lovell. He is he's one of my favorite people. It was super cool working with him. We set up a couple of days of private training, and you know, set up the video and everything. And man, he's an exceptional human being. John's one of those people that is pretty damn good at anything he does. I don't care whether it's combat sports, shooting, video production, business. He's an exceptional human being. So I like John a lot, and it was great working with him. And we continue to work together. They just started their own, basically their own YouTube.
Yeah.
And, we're gonna be doing quite a bit with them on that project. So, because you know, that kind of, I'm too old for that. That that kind of missed me. You know, the guys who are in their late 30s, they've got the handle on that better than anybody. Now, I'm sure I could learn, but I'm just not interested, and I'd rather piggyback on somebody like John that's fucking good at it, you know, and reap the benefits, because he thinks that, you know, legacy guys like me have still something to say. So to answer that question, the first part of that question, I like John quite a bit. Second question: what brands of clinch picks? There's only one. That would be the Shivworks brand. So that it's just for the sake of nomenclature. A lot of people think that this just yeah, absolutely. A lot of people think that the clinch pick is a generic name like Karambit, and it's not. A clinch pick is a proper name of a very specific knife designed by me, you know, and we've had several people manufacture them over the years. Currently, we have Bontang in the United States that makes them domestically here in country, and then we have them manufactured in Asia. We've got a really, really good factory over there that is producing a budget clinch pick, and that's actually the one that I carry. What we wanted to do we wanted to get the price down to like less than $100 US. So, you know, if you did use it and it ended up in an evidence bag after using it compared to a $300 custom knife, you know, nobody was boo-hooing. So I actually carry one of the Chinese clinch picks. We've got a lot of people that carry them. We just came out with Clinch Pick 2.0, which is an improvement done by Bond on the knife where we flatten and checker the scales just a little bit. So yeah, so Clinch Pick, Shivworks, that's the one. Finally, Ed Calderon. I have not seen Ed's empty-handed material, so I can't really comment on that. Ed and I've talked a couple of times on the phone. And I told him a few years ago, hey, man, you've got what it takes to be successful. And apparently he's really, really blown up. You know, he got on the Joe Rogan experience. And I think Ed's doing well. So I can't comment on his empty hand stuff. I've never really seen it. I've never met Ed in person. He's got an interesting take as far as his minimalist and escapist mindset that I think is very relevant. So yeah, good guy to follow.
Okay, cool. Excellent. All right. So last question. And I kind of know the answer to this as well. Robin's put right at the bottom here. When are we getting you back to Cape Town? I guess that's what lives.
Whenever we can all touch each other again, and James is not busy, I'm more than happy to come back. So I love Cape Town. I love South Africa. It's a beautiful country, and I love Tabletop Mountain. I love the beach. It is one of my favorite places in the world. So a lot of people ask me in my travels if I could live anywhere or have a second home outside of the United States, where would that be? And the answer is always the same, either in Greece or in Cape Town, one of the two. So I'm more than happy to come back.
Please feel free to come and move to Cape Town. That would not be a terrible thing by any stretch of the imagination.
Maybe a retirement home, man. You know, that may be the way to go. You know, but I love the country, and I love Cape Town specifically. Right. Man, it's one of my favorite places. It is.
Great. Okay, I'll accept the responsibility of making that happen when we get out of all of this COVID.
We need some mat time, brother. It's been a long time. We're all older and fatter and grayer, and I'd love to get back on the mat and just, you know, get up underneath your pressure and do some jiu-jitsu, man, and have you school me. I'm looking forward to that, man. It'll be a ton of fun.
Fantastic. And Phil actually has put at the bottom here, he's counting the days too.
Yeah.
So, there we go.
Phil and I we love Cape Town. We do. We have been quite actually our favorite whiskey bar is in Cape Town. Bascule, yeah, in the V&A. Yeah, the waterfront. Love that place, man. Huge, like 400 different whiskeys. So awesome place.
And I found another one as well, actually, just underneath in the V&A as well. So we can, not a problem. All right, we'll make it happen, Greg.
All right, we'll do it.
Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate you taking the time out to chat with us, and great to connect with you again after all these years too.
Brother, absolutely good to connect with you. I've been following you for a while. I'm very happy you're successful and you look great, buddy. Keep doing you.